I struggled to shore and fell upon the sand. It was warm and soft, like pressing my face against the cheek of God. And somewhere two eyes were smiling at having me there. I was so spent, I could hardly move. And so Richard Parker went ahead of me. He stretched his legs and walked along the shore. At the edge of the jungle, he stopped. I was certain he was going to look back at me, flatten his ears to his head, growl, that he would bring our relationship to an end in some way. But he just stared ahead into the jungle. And then Richard Parker, my fierce companion, the terrible one who kept me alive, disappeared forever from my life. After a few hours, a member of my own species found me. He left and returned with a group who carried me away. I wept like a child. Not because I was overwhelmed at having survived, although I was. I was weeping because Richard Parker left me so unceremoniously. It broke my heart. You know, my father was right. Richard Parker never saw me as his friend. After all we had been through, we didn't even look back. But I have to believe there was more in his eyes than my own reflection staring back at me. I know it. I felt it. Even if I can't prove it. You know, I've left so much behind. My family, the zoo, India, Anandi. I suppose in the end, the whole of life becomes an act of letting go. But what always hurts the most is not taking a moment to say goodbye. I was never able to thank my father for all I learned from him. To tell him without his lessons, I would never have survived. I know Richard Parker is a tiger, but I wish I had said, "It's over, we survived. Thank you for saving my life. I love you, Richard Parker. You'll always be with me. I can't be with you."
How's everybody this evening? I just got back in my last off day. Started this new security company. So I end up with, I work 4 days. I work 4 nights. I still work nights. And I have 3 days off, which is better. So earlier I thought that I would treat myself out to my favorite buffet. It's at Caesar's Palace. It's a buffet where it has all different types of different food that you can eat. And so, you know, I get those nights where I really want to eat some meat, you know, like steak. And so this particular buffet at Caesar's Palace, they prepare their food right before you. So the food is always fresh. So I thought that I would go and give myself some me time, treat myself out since things in my life are going phenomenal right now. So it's like a little celebration of how far I've come since, through the years, especially since I've been back home from Georgia and everything that I went through out there. I just wanted to just get into Ben's and just go to Caesar's Palace, to my favorite buffet, and just have a nice, quiet dinner amongst myself. I want to share something. One of the reasons why those two videos was before this particular video is because there was a security guard who I used to work with when I was a manager back in the kitchen at the Rio. And his brother named Keith. Keith used to work the security booth when the employees would come in the back door, the employee entrance. Keith would work that booth all the time. So me and Keith became good associates. I won't say we became friends as far as he's concerned, especially after what he said to me tonight. That's fine. But as I was walking out of Caesar's Palace, I came in contact with Keith after, I quit and I left the Rio. I believe it was the year 2000. I believe it was the year of 2014. Or was it year 2014? Because it had to be the year of 2014, because that's when I had my motorcycle accident, and I had to take about 3 months off so that my body could heal. And so but actually I had resigned from the Rio, and I was getting ready to get hired at another place that used to be called the Las Vegas Hilton, of where Elvis used to perform a whole lot, but it's called the Westgate right now. They was going to hire me as a manager there, but what happened was I had my motorcycle accident, and so after I resigned from the Rio, and I was getting ready to accept another position at what used to be called the Las Vegas Hilton, as I said, I had my motorcycle accident. And so with that happening, I lost both jobs because I wasn't able to start at the Las Vegas Hilton because I had my accident. This is all leading to something important. And so before I left the Rio, Keith was and some other people were a bit upset, and they were saying, okay, well, just stay in touch, bro. Just stay in touch. And so when I left the Rio and all of those things happened, and I'm not saying this is because of my accident, because I'm built this is just the way that I'm built. I didn't stay in touch with anyone. I just went on with my life. And so when I came in contact with Keith tonight, he was visually, I won't say upset, but he was visually disappointed because as I was walking out of Caesar's Palace, there's some elevators that you have to take upstairs in order to or to let you out at the parking lot. So I'm walking out of the buffet, and him and his wife was walking down the hall getting ready to enter the buffet. And he said, "David Brable." And I looked at him. He said, "Man, don't tell me you don't recognize me, because some of us age a whole lot." And he told me, "Wow." He said, "Even after that motorcycle accident," he said, "you still look the same. You barely age." He said, of course, you got some gray here and there." I'm like, "Oh, how you doing, Keith?" You know. And I asked him, I said, "So how's things been going?" Now people may say, "You didn't speak to his wife?" No, I don't speak to other men's wives. Then he introduced his wife to me, and then I spoke. "How you doing?" "I'm dating." Wow. And so he asked his wife, "Go ahead and go into the buffet. I need to talk to this brother about something important." And so I'm thinking, well, maybe he's going to tell me that somebody that I knew at the Rio when I was working there might have passed away or something. You just never know. And so when she went in the buffet, he pulled me to the side. He said, "Brother, what's going on?" And I'm like, what are you talking about?" He said, "Look, why is it that I have not heard from you in so many years?" He said, "What's going on with you?" He said, "It's like you just you just left, and it's like you didn't even look back, and you just kept going." And I told him, "Keith, I understand what you're saying." I said, "But this is not the first time that I've heard this about my person. Uh, I don't know how to explain it." I said, "But I once I move forward into my next life venture, my concern is always what's next, where's the Creator taking me, and everything." And I told him, I said, sometimes people complain about that a whole lot because I don't stay in touch with them, as most people would think that I should, because when they are in contact with me, whether it's work or even in my personal life, I have a tendency of having an effect on people to where they become very close to me, and I become very close to them, but not attached, if that's understood. So you're able to become close to people, either who you work with or people in your life, and you become attached to those people. And that's why people say, "Hey, if my number, stay in touch. Call me sometimes. Call me like once a week," or something like that. Now, it's easy for me to say that that's a form of attachment. Now, people may say, "Come on, Dave, that's just staying in touch with people." I get that. But I'm not made. Once I go into my next venture in life, I just move straight ahead. And of course, my mind reflects back on people saying, "Stay in touch, Dave, stay in touch." And my mind struggles with that information in my head. Okay, I'm gonna have to call him, I need to call him, just to stay in touch. But sometimes that feels as though it's a burden. See, I'm the type of human being to where I have to be inspired to call someone. It can't feel as though it's a burden or a personal responsibility. I have to be inspired. I have to wake up one morning, or it has to hit me one day. You know what? I'll call Keith and see how he's doing. Okay, now that could be me contacting Keith or anyone else in my life after 6 months to a year. I mean, there are some people that are like that. And most people who are introverted are like that. And I'm a introvert. I'm very introverted, and I I enjoy my own company. I'm not the type of man who gets lonely or anything like that. I'm a writer, as you all know, who observe these videos, and I'm always studying. I'm interested in the life journey, and so he told me. He said, "You know who you remind me of?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "You remember that movie?" He said, "Have you ever seen this movie called The Life of Pi?" I said, "Yeah, you talking about the East Indian boy with the tiger?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You remember at the end of the movie when they had washed ashore after the huge storm that they were in, and the boy was laid out on the sand? He was stretched out on the sand." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You notice how the tiger just jumped off the boat, and he didn't look back at the Indian boy, and he walked. He stretched his legs and he walked to the edge of the jungle, and he stood there observing that jungle. And then when the Indian boy passed out from exhaustion, when the people came and woke him up, he noticed that the tiger just walked into the woods, and he said he never saw him again. He said it hurt him to the point to where he said it broke his heart. And he said, because he left me so unceremoniously, he said, it broke my heart. And so when Keith told me that, I looked Keith in the eyes and he looked me in the eyes. He said, "David, you're the tiger." He said, "You don't say goodbye to people." He said, "You just move forward." He said, "If you're going to walk out of people's lives, at least say goodbye to them." He said, because people grow close to you. People grow to love you. And he said, you just walk out of people's lives. You just keep going forward. And he said, that's a very, as the Indian boy said, unceremoniously, that's a very unceremonious way to walk out of people's lives. And as the Indian guy said, what hurted him the most is that not being able to take a moment to say goodbye. And when Keith told me that, I had to agree with him. I'm like, you know what? You're very correct. You're very correct. And there's nothing that I can say about that. And because he's not the first person that told me about that part of myself. And I have to admit that he's right. But I told Keith, I don't know if there's anything I can do about that. I said, I know that that's a part of myself that I have to look into, especially now that you brought it to my attention. It helped me think of someone else I did like that as well. And so we exchanged information again, and he asked me, he said, "Hey, you want to join us in here?" I'm like, "No, I'm actually out. I'm just coming out of that buffet, you know." So he said, "Okay." He said, "But Dave," he said, "Brother Dave," he said, "Please stay in touch this time, man." He said, "Just don't walk out of people's lives like that. You know, don't walk out of people's lives." So um, after we parted ways, you know, we shook hands, gave each other a hug and everything. As I was driving home, I thought of another friend that I had. His name was George. I met George back in the 80s, and George was a very nice brother, big guy. He looked just like the rapper Chub Rock. I used to call him Chub Rock. George was a cook downtown at this casino that I always take women to for my first date. It's called the the Golden Nugget. He's a cook down there, or he was a cook. And so George ended up getting married, and he bought a house. He moved out of the apartment complex that we were sharing after he met this Caucasian woman, and he moved on the other side of town. And so me and George used to have a whole lot of beautiful intellectual conversations. And so I'm this way when one of my friends get married, I step back a little bit, because when you're dealing with marriage, that changes people. And so I gave George his space, you know, it's his honeymoon time and everything. So 2 months after he got married, George called me and he said, "Hey, Dave, I just moved into this house up here on Upland, right off of Charleston. That's going far west." He said, "I want you to come by and have dinner with us, and I want to introduce you to my wife and her children." He said, "In that way we can continue our conversation and everything." I said, "Cool." So I went by there and I met his wife and his stepchildren. And so that night, him and I sat in his living room and we continued our insightful intellectual conversation. And so we talked for like 2 hours. And at a point, his wife, she would pass by us and she would be listening. And that first time I went by there, everything was fine. The second time that I went by, I have to speed this up a little bit. The second time I went by, him and I was in the living room having another insightful, beautiful intellectual conversation. This conversation was about me still having very strong feelings for my son's mother, because this was, I would say, a couple of years, if even that long, after my son's mother and I had broke up. And so I was sitting talking to him about that, because I was conflicted, because I still loved both my son's mother. I still loved her tremendously. I still love her tremendously, and I still love her. Just not tremendously, but I'm going to always love her. I'm going to always love her. And not because I have those two sons by her. She's just that one that I'm going to always love. I'm going to always love them. Always. And so through this conversation, we started talking about other things. Halfway into the second hour, his wife comes in and she sits on the couch along with him. And so I noticed how she was staring at me as I was explaining myself. And so what George and I do after we have these conversations, we always embrace each other with a big hug, because that's my family, that's my brother. And so when we was hugging, she got up and she had this little sad look on her face like, can I get a hug too? And so when him and I unembraced, she was standing there thinking that I was going to hug her. And I put my hand out and I shook her hand, and her and George started laughing. And the reason why George laughed is because he didn't get a chance to let his wife know that David he's not built that way. David is not going to be hugging on people's wives. He's not like that. He didn't get a chance to tell her that, obviously. So after I shook her hand and everything, I left and I drove home. So 3 days later, after that, I called the house to see if George wanted to make another appointment for another discussion. George was working overtime, so George was at work. And so when I called, she answered the phone and she said, hello. I'm like, hello, this is David. I'm George's friend. She said, oh, how are you doing? I was like, I'm fine. I said, is George home right now? She said, no, he's at work right now. He's working overtime. I told her, I said, okay. I said, well, when he gets in, could you tell him to give me a call? Because I wanted to know if he wanted to get together this coming weekend while he was off. She said, okay, I'll do that. Then she said, so how you doing, beautiful? And I'm like, just tell George that I called. She said, okay, bye. And so when I hung up, I thought about it. I'm like, not getting in the middle of this. I'm not new. Now, this was This was 1997. This was 1997. No, it was 1996. 1996. And as cruel as this may sound, I never contact George ever again. Until this day, I haven't seen or talked to George, in spite of how close we were. Because I did not want to come around with his wife thinking those type of thoughts. To me, as quiet and deceptive and insidious as that type of environment would be, had I continued to venture into it, it would have been a hostile environment. There was a possibility that my continuing to ignore her would have eventually backfired. Because if it's one thing that I know, and you can say that I'm racist, I don't care. When white women cannot have their way, they stir up a whole bunch of conflict. And so I knew that if I continued, that something bad was going to happen. If I told George what I had experienced, I would have risked him not believing me. I would have risked causing tremors in their marriage. If I would have told him the other times that I would have been coming over due to the fact that she would have been angry at me for telling him, she would have continued to stir up a hostile environment. And I did not want to be blamed. I did not want to be the object of their marriage becoming complicated and eventually somewhere down the line fail. So I never contacted George again. I moved on. Now, did that hurt me? No, I was disappointed. So within the, you might as well say, entity of disappointment, doesn't it hurt? It hurts, but it hurts in a manner of way to where it stings a little bit. But when wisdom is with you, and when intelligence is with you, and when it gives you insight of the possibilities, it gives you a soothing feeling to where you're able to move forward without it hurting to the degree to where you have to go through a period of healing, of not continuing to see your brother as time goes on. So I just moved forward with my life. And when George would call me, I just didn't answer my phone anymore. As a matter of fact, I went to the length of even getting my phone number. And sometimes you just have to make a sacrifice and move forward for the preservation of something that you perceive is more important than even your close friendship with people. So sometimes people think you don't show any compassion or emotion or anything like that, but some of us are made like that. Some of us are more intellectual, and some of us are less emotional and more intellectual. And sometimes people will perceive that as being cold. But the root of that is love for your journey. And in the case of George, my love for him superseded my love for our friendship, as complicated as that may sound. I did not want to be the object in his marriage of where it started falling apart. So I sacrificed my close friendship with him in order to preserve his marriage and preserve the dignity of his marriage. Now, I'm pretty certain that George wondered what happened to me. He's probably angry. You know, if I come in contact with George, there's no telling. I don't even know if they're still married or anything like that. You know, sometimes I have thoughts of going by the home to even see if they're still living there, but I don't know if he's still married to this woman or not. And I don't know. So I just let it go and I just move forward. But you know, some of us are made like that. Some of us are made. And he is correct. I am very much like that type. When it's time for me to move forward, I do so. I'm able to get close to people, but not attached. Therefore, when I get close to people, it implies that my friendship and my relationship with them is very genuine. It's very genuine. It's not fake. Even if it's on the job, my friendship is very genuine with people. But when it's time for us to move on, I don't have a problem of letting go. And so with that, that's a dual component. That's not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes that can be a very bad thing. Sometimes when you are so focused, or even when you're not focused, that's just a part of who and what you are. Sometimes you have to even adjust that for the sake of people not feeling as though you have abandoned them by not staying in touch with them, because they've grown close to you because of the conversations that you've had. You know, because me and Keith had a very good friendship, and it was based upon insight to a whole lot of profound intellectual conversations and spiritual conversations. And so people have a tendency to attach themselves not only to you, but to your mind. And they become dependent on you in a sense, you know, for what the Creator gives you in terms of guidance. And so I'm happy that I experienced that tonight, because he checked me and I had to look at myself. I'm like, you know, you're right, bro. There's no excuse for that. And yes, you are correct. I am like that type. And I promise you that that's going to change. I'm not going to work on it. I'm going to die to it. So I just wanted to share that before I take my rest. Out here in Las Vegas, it is 12:24 a.m. So with that being said, as I always say, I appreciate those who took the time to listen to this, and maybe there's something in this that can help you. Maybe you are the tiger, okay? Or as my other video spoke on, by not being able to feel certain things because having a relationship with my grandparents, I was robbed of being able to grieve them, you know, as the video said. But this is primarily a comparison to the tiger in the movie The Life of Pi. And I'm hoping that YouTube will allow me to upload it after I finish this video, just so I can give you an example of what Keith talked about in terms of the movie. But with that being said, I greet everyone a good night and we stay human, like I always say. Blessings.